What are the biggest holes on the Dallas Cowboys roster entering free agency? We'll break it down on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. And on today's show, we're taking a look at the Dallas Cowboys roster as we get ready for free agency, which starts, I believe, the legal tampering period is Monday. It's coming up quick. So let's take a big picture look at where the Cowboys roster is. We'll go position by position, but let's start on offense. Where do you think their biggest need is at on the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah, I think the biggest need on the offensive side of the ball is also, spoiler alert, we've already said it in several other episodes. I think it's the biggest need on the team, and that's a secondary passing weapon in this offense. And that doesn't necessarily need to be a wide receiver, but obviously wide receiver seems to be the kind of obvious spot to look. We don't really know what the status is with Brandon Cooks and him coming back with the Cowboys. I would argue that even if you did sign Brandon Cooks to a small returning deal, you may even still want to consider going out and getting another guy that kind of will be that secondary weapon, just because it felt like when you had Cooks last year, his ability to kind of draw attention away from CeeDee Lamb was, it came and went, it felt like, right? I do feel like the Cowboys probably need to improve that situation a little bit better. There is a possibility that they improve that situation in the draft. But I think that if they're looking to kind of, make at least one big splash in free agency, one improvement of the roster. And again, we said it yesterday, doesn't need to necessarily be only free agency, could be a trade, whatever methodology, someone getting cut in the signing. But I do think that is the kind of main focus of where the Cowboys need to improve on their offense.
Yeah, so Brandon Cooks is going to be going into year 13 in 2025. I mean, you just can't rely on somebody at year 13 to be your number 2 receiver. And as much as I love Brandon Cooks, and I think he could still be a good player in the NFL, I wonder what it would look like if it's CeeDee Lamb, another receiver that you bring in, Brandon Cooks, Jalen Tolbert, Kavontae Turpin, Jonathan Mingo. You also have got Ryan Flournoy, who you drafted. It's almost too many mouths to feed in one offense. And I know that sounds like, hey, that's champagne problems, but you do get to a point when you have too many guys in your wide receiver room. I think you want to have 2 and then some complementary players. So I'm wondering, it might be for the best for them to just kind of move off of Brandon Cooks and maybe re-sign him after the draft if it doesn't pan out. But how do you get that player? Is it through free agency? Is it through the draft? Is it through trade? I don't know, but I agree with you. I think that's their number one weakness.
Yeah, I think that it's one of those situations where they're just kind of open to looking around at what presents itself. And I think that's a pretty decent plan, considering, just in the last 48 hours, we've seen a lot of different situations open up. And I think, like we talked about on yesterday's show, the wide receiver market, whether that's free agency or however you want to obtain a wide receiver, it's wide open right now. And I don't know I guess my question that this all comes down to is, do you think that the fact that the market is opening up the way it is that a commentary on how the NFL views these wide receivers in the draft, right? Because I'm wondering, in the draft, it feels like you could get any number of wide receiver 2 to wide receiver 4 option. I think there's lots of those guys. I don't think that there's a ton of guys that you would like to build your passing offense around. And I think that's the kind of guy that, you're starting to see become more available in the free agent market. You're seeing guys like DK Metcalf, right, that are coming available for trade, but that's obviously a big time trade and signing, right? You hope that kind of chaos, that all those big names that are being thrown out there for trade may push down the numbers on some of the kind of 1B, 2As that you're wide receiver 1B, 2As that you may be looking at. I don't know that the Cowboys are necessarily looking to trade for DK Metcalf and pay him
No, I don't
whatever
think so.
$30 million a year, but does that drive down the price a little bit and remove some of the suitors for maybe Devontae Adams or, some one of these maybe older guys who might have still something left, but aren't looking for that alpha wide receiver payday right away?
One of the things I think is really interesting in free agency, we had two really awesome wide receiver drafts in 2014 and 2015. That was the 2014. We had like Odell, Brandon Cooks, Devontae Adams. 2015, you had Amari Cooper. It's like all those guys are just getting to the end of their careers, and now there's just so many of these guys that have had great careers, but they're looking for like one last payday. I got a feeling some of these guys are going to get squeezed in the free agent market, and I think Brandon Cooks has a chance to be one of those guys that just kind of gets left without a deal. But I'm not sure what the best course of action is for the Cowboys to address this need. I will say another need that we need to mention is the running back need.
Absolutely.
We think that they're likely going to try to re-sign Rico Dowdle, but even if they sign Rico, as great as I thought he was down the stretch last year, you need somebody with a little bit more home run speed to pair with him, or you just need to get somebody that can be an every down workhorse back. Now, this is not a great free agent period to get a running back, but the draft is really good, and I think that's one of their top 5 needs, but I think the draft is going to line up where they're going to be okay.
Yeah, and I think that I've always kind of looked towards that running back need as a problem for the draft to solve, right? But I don't think it's only for the draft to solve. I think you're right that just because if you look at what they have on the roster, they need numbers too, right? It's not just the top player; they also need numbers. So I think it makes a ton of sense if you want to.
We're just not concerned about it, right? We know that they're going to figure it out, but I mean, in terms of like what they currently have, it might be their biggest need.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's certainly the biggest hole, right? It's just like you feel like it's a need that can be filled at almost any point. And I do think that, like you said, I think it's a need that probably could be filled solely through the draft. But I do feel like you probably would be smarter to do half and half, right? Get a veteran in here, and then also draft somebody that maybe is the kind of the juice of the running back room.
Now, there are a lot of people out there that think offensive line continues to be a big need for Dallas, and I can understand the arguments, right? You just lost Zach Martin. Terrence Steele has been very up and down. Your left tackle, Tyler Guyton, struggled last year. But where are you with the Cowboys offensive line in terms of that position of need going into free agency?
I think it's tough for me to gauge right now because we have a new offensive line coach. We've got, a kind of a new scheme kind of being, and unfolded in that room. So it's tough to know how to like gauge that without knowing how these new coaches feel about the current players on the roster, right? I mean, I could easily, squint and tell you, yeah, they probably will like Terrence Steele and not quite really ready to give up on Tyler Guyton, which you shouldn't. It's only been 1 year. And then you've got, Awesome Richards and maybe you can like go and get a veteran guy to kind of be in the mix. Maybe you just re-sign Chuma Edoga, right? And just do another 1-year deal or something. And I feel like you could, tell yourself if you like those players, a year of development, this offensive line is kind of on its way. It's still young. It's still growing. Terrence Steele is the veteran on this group now. But I mean, like, we're feeling old, buddy.
I know.
So I think that, and then right guard, it's like, I feel like with Hoffman and Bass, you have a soft floor. So if you feel like you can improve the situation, and if you see a situation where the money is right, then maybe you go after that. But honestly, it's also a situation where if you want to improve that position, you probably could do it in the draft too. So this may be a position that they wait until after the draft to see how they feel about the players on their roster and what they got in the draft.
2 things quickly before we move on. Number 1, did you see the stat during the NFL Combine about Terrence Steele? They were showing the most snaps played.
Yeah, most snaps played in college or something.
Yeah, per game, and it was Travis Hunter at number 1, Terrence Steele at number 2. I just thought that was hilarious. The other one was I like TJ Bass. I like Awesome Richards. We'll see what Nathan Thomas can do. Somebody they drafted last year. It does feel like they're like one good backup short, and it's probably a swing tackle, right? Maybe they bring back Chewy Udoga. Maybe they go out and get some kind of veteran that's maybe like has 1 year left, like a Morgan Moses, right? That has played a bunch of games. He's in his upper 30s now, but you bring him in to be your swing guy in case Steele doesn't work out. But I actually feel good about their offensive line. I don't want them to rush out and sign anybody in free agency, but if they can get one more guy that you feel good about, I think they're fine there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want them to necessarily sign someone that's going to step on Awesome Richard's toes, because the truth of the matter is we saw him play a lot and he played well. And I think he's earned the opportunity to kind of come in here, at least competing for that spot, right? That swing tackle spot, right? So yeah, I don't disagree. I think a veteran would help, but let's not make too much room or lose too much room for guys like Awesome Richards and Nathan Thomas and Earl Bostic to come in here and compete as well.
All right, let's talk about defense, because I think the Cowboys actually have more holes on the defensive side of the ball. We'll get into that next. This episode is brought to you by Chewy. You've probably heard of Chewy. They really do have everything to keep your pet happy and healthy, whether you're shopping for food, treats, or even pet health care. Chewy makes it easy, fast, and affordable. With over 100,000 products from all of your favorite brands, Chewy has everything your pet needs, from food to treats to toys to bed to grooming. Whatever you need, they've got it. And it's not just for dogs and cats. They've got supplies for birds, fish, reptiles, and small pets too. Chewy also makes it easy to manage your pet's health with prescriptions, telehealth visits, and even in-person vet clinics rolling out nationwide. And auto ship is a game changer. You can set up automatic deliveries for food, treats, or any essentials so that you never run out, and you can easily change or cancel at any time. Chewy has everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. And right now, you can save $20 off your first order when you get free shipping by going to chewy.com or clicking the link in the description. Save $20 on your first order with free shipping by clicking the link in the description. Minimum purchase required. New customers only. Terms and conditions apply. See site for complete details. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are taking a look at the Cowboys' biggest holes on the roster going into free agency, which starts on Monday. Let's talk about defense, because they've got some really good high-end talent, including Micah Parsons, Deron Bland, Oso Digizua. They've got some young guys and Mozzie Smith and Overshone and Nealon. But where are their biggest holes?
I mean, they have holes, right? For sure. Yeah. And really, it's one of those things where I'm not worried about like the talent. And I think for the reasons you just laid out, I'm not necessarily worried about the talent overall, the top end talent of this defense, because I think the holes that you just need to backfill, if you can get them with good, middle round, not middle round, but like, middle range talent. Right. Yeah. Middle tier free agents that you can get right back into where you need to be a really good defense. I think you have to start at linebacker, right? Just because, I mean, I don't know who, if you and again, I hate when people say this, but if you had to start a game today, I don't know how you are starting assembling a starting linebacker core, right? It's basically Maris, Leofau, and then probably Damone Clark, right? So
Clark's a free agent.
Damone Clark is?
Yeah.
He doesn't have one more year? Oh, man. Well, then you're really in trouble. So, I think, it's now you've got basically no one. So,
never mind. Clark's got one more year left. I apologize.
Okay. I was going to say, I thought he had one more.
Yeah, 2022. I just double checked. Yeah.
So, right now, it's basically, you have Overshone, obviously, but you don't know when he's coming back. Leofau is fine, and Clark is fine. You've lost Kendricks. You're going to lose Nick Vigil, who I thought was a special teamer guy that gave you solid snaps as a linebacker when you had to have him in there. I wouldn't be so shocked if Vigil came back, honestly. Because
it sounds like the Cowboys are working on that.
They're working on that. Kendricks, I haven't heard anything about, but I'm not necessarily expecting him to come back because there's no Zimmer. So
no.
The Cowboys either need to figure something out in the free agent market to kind of cover themselves until Overshone can get back up and running, or they need to kind of draft a guy probably pretty high to come in and be a solid force. Because, I mean, frankly, even when Overshone comes back, like, he's coming off of a very brutal injury, and you need bodies that you can rely
Well,
on.
and you're not even completely sure that Marist is a starting NFL linebacker yet. Like he's had the healthiest one that played last year, right?
Yeah, I will say this because I think he gets lost in the shuffle all the time. I mean, frankly, you just thought he was off the team, for God's sakes.
He hardly played last year. He was a healthy scratch most of the season.
But when he did, but see, that's my argument, right? Is that when he did play, he actually did play really well. Like they kept him off the field because clearly he wasn't a good fit for what Zimmer was doing.
Clark, by the way, super.
Yeah, Damone Clark. Sorry, but when injuries forced him onto the field, like go look at his PFF grades. I'm pretty sure they were pretty outstanding, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that this is a guy that has been thrown around a lot and has dealt with a lot of circumstance, to be honest. And to be perfectly frank, I think was a guy who just needed snaps because he just needed to kind of develop some instincts. I am not giving up on Damone Clark yet, so I do want to see what he can do coming into this year. But you obviously can't rely on him, right? So you need to go out in the market and find either a free agent linebacker or, like I said, someone in the top 90 picks. Likely.
This is not the best linebacker class in free agency, especially with Zach Bond re-signing yesterday with Philadelphia. And I don't think Dallas is going to be in on some of the older linebackers like Bobby Wagner, Levante David. Probably nor should they. But if you just need like competent linebacker play, I think you can get it for $6 to $7 million a year. My favorite guy is Robert Spillane for the Raiders. Just makes every tackle, plays every game. I think you can spend not a ton, but a decent amount of money and get a good starter. And if it's Spillane, hopefully Overshown coming back, Leofau, Damone Clark, I guess, I think that's at least competent, and that's all you need right now until we get to the draft.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think that, one of the reasons we're not panicking about linebacker is the same reason we're not panicking about running back. Linebackers is a position in which you can at least get competent play at almost any point off of the street, So it's the high-end guys that are hard to get.
And I want to mention a couple other positions, like defensive tackle. They clearly need somebody else there, whether that's more of a traditional nose. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to bring back like Linval Joseph to come back and play 15, 20 snaps, but they need somebody else there. I'm just wondering, Landon, like I'm looking at the defensive ends that are going to be available in free agency. On your roster right now, it's Micah, it's Marshawn Kneeland, Sam Williams, and Tyra Sweet. And that's really it, right? It's Micah who's the only one that gives you a little bit of juice. Sam Williams coming off a torn ACL. I wonder if edge rusher is a spot. Like if the Cowboys are going to spend up for, let's say, one tier 2 free agent, I wonder if edge rushers where they can get the most bang for their buck.
I wouldn't be shocked. In fact, I would be surprised if they don't sign one of Chauncey Golston or DeMarcus Lawrence, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't think anymore that it's going to be both. I do think that there is more of a chance than I thought before that DeMarcus Lawrence is the guy that's left to go elsewhere. But I think at this point, if they were to sign Chauncey or DeMarcus, one or the other, that would at least shore up the position enough for now that you would feel comfortable that you could draft freely, right? That you didn't feel like you had to go get Shamar Stewart or, you know what I'm saying? Like you had to like hope that he fell to you at 12.
So here's one of the things I'm trying to figure out. Let's say it's Chauncey that they want back. Are they better off bringing Chauncey back at, let's say it's $7 million a year? Or would you be better off spending $14 million a year and trying to go out and get Khalil Mack or Joey Bosa or Hassan Reddick or Chase Young? Like, is that the better path to actually get somebody who can like consistently win off the edge, but maybe has some injury problems? Or do you just want to re-sign Chauncey and then maybe draft that guy?
Yeah, I see. I kind of want to re-sign Chauncey because I think he provides you with really high level inside-outside play. And then you've already got like, you could go get another pass rush specialist veteran guy that probably won't be too expensive, a la Lawson, maybe not Carl Lawson, right? But because you already have Sam Williams and Marshawn Kneeland coming back as well. Like, I know that we don't want to like count them in part of the count for some of the aspects of it.
I'll count Kneeland, but Williams is like This is another new coaching staff coming out for torn ACL. Like, I just don't know what to expect.
I guess what I'm saying is that if you have another power defensive end and you're asking Sam Williams to just come in and rush the passer, like that's a role that I feel like even coming off of the ACL that he would be able to handle. Right now, we'll new defensive coaching staff or whatever. But I think if you could go out and get if you sign Golson, it gives you a little bit of flexibility overall on the defensive line, including defensive tackle on passing downs. And that doesn't necessarily preclude you from also going get another veteran who could also just kind of help in a rotation.
Last thing, I think they need another outside corner, even if they bring back Jordan Lewis, because you've got Trayvon Diggs coming back from a major knee injury. We'll see when he's even ready. And then outside of that, it's Kalen Carson coming off a major shoulder injury. It's Josh Butler coming off a torn ACL. Like, if they had to play a game, and I know we hate saying this, but if they had to play a game today, you have one corner that you feel good about, Deron Bland, and that's it.
It's funny because it's almost like the wide receiver position. It's crazy how these positions like mirror each other on it. It is like the wide receiver position where you feel good about your number one guy, right? Right now, that's Deron Bland. You're not so sure who's the cornerback 2 is, right? Because of injury stuff. And then you've got like a long list of all these guys that you kind of like. I mean, I like Keemon Hall and Josh Butler, what they showed us last year, but I'm not ready to make them cornerback 2 by any stretch of the imagination. So it is funny how those kind of positions mirror each other.
I want to say, I keep feeling like cornerback could be like a sneaky early pick in the draft, whether it's round 1, round 2. We just haven't really talked about it enough. We'll make sure we do that in the upcoming days. Let's rank the Cowboys' 3 biggest needs as we get ready for free agency on Monday. We will do that next. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft Show with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day, and find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Landon, let's rank these needs, the top 3 going into free agency. What do you have as their absolute top need on both sides of the ball?
Okay, so just so we're clear, these are their top 3 needs just in general, not necessarily the top 3 needs to be filled in free agency.
No, just in general. Like right now, we're like, hey, this is what we have to fill by the time we get to the season.
So I think we mentioned it, right? Number 1 to me seems like, if we're accepting the idea that like we're going to be able to, we're getting starting level quality positions at every one of these spots. The goal that we have to fill, I think, is getting a secondary pass catching weapon for Dak. And so whether that's wide receiver 2, whether that's a top end tight end, I think that needs to be the kind of first thing that we go to, because it's the hardest thing I think to get on this list. And I think it's probably going to be the most expensive. So that's what I have listed first.
Yeah, I would agree. It's just, I don't know if they're going to use the number 12 pick on that player. Yeah, I would love to see them do that, because I have a couple guys that are going to be available at that spot that I think could really help out. But I agree. Like, that was my biggest takeaway coming out of the playoffs is, with Dak's mobility getting worse and worse every year, you need to make sure you surround him with as many weapons as possible so he can be more of a point guard rather than trying to have to be Superman every single play, right? Make it where defenses have to play more cover 2, and the safeties can't just creep up and double CeeDee Lamb. So I agree. That's number 1. What's number 2 for you?
I think for number 2, just as the roster stands right now, is the kind of mirror image, right? We have to figure something out at corner, right? Yeah. Signing Jordan Lewis is a great first step, right? But figuring out like, where is Trayvon's health? What is there available if he's not, going to be ready for week 1 or for training camp? Who's going to be cornerback 2? So I think that can be solved in a couple different spots, but that is something that the Cowboys need to have a plan for immediately, just because of, like we said, it's a position that's hard to get. The scarcity is the difficult thing. So you need to open yourself up to all options, and that includes free agency.
But you know what's, I agree with you, by the way. That, to me, that's their number 2 need. But at the same time, I'm looking at their roster like,
well, yeah.
Well, no, it's like, if you're paying Jordan Lewis, another contract, which I don't think it's going to be a ton. I think it'll be relatively cheap. Trayvon Diggs is already one of the league's highest paid corners, and Deron Bland is eligible for a contract extension right now. And the Cowboys would probably be wise to do a deal right now. I don't know if you can go out and spend $10, $12 million a year on another cornerback because now you're just throwing so much money at the position. I almost wondered if like you have to spend a high draft pick at that position just because you want to kind of stagger these contracts a little bit. But the issue is this is not a super deep cornerback class.
Nope.
And cornerbacks usually struggle to produce and play right away. So maybe they are better off trying to get a 1-year rental and, hey, Stephon Gilmore, do you want to come back and play for one more year until we get this thing figured out?
It would be ironic to have Gilmore come back and play the stopgap role after doing so after Diggs got hurt before, right? Yeah, I mean, like I think it makes some sense. I mean, otherwise the kind of gamble that you're taking is we're thinking that Diggs will come back by week 2 and maybe we can survive the first few weeks with the corners we have on the roster, like, which it seems insane, but this is also what the Cowboys have done at certain points in the middle of the season too. It just seems insane to do it at the beginning of the season, right? I think that you could survive that way, but I don't think it's ideal for sure. And especially with the NFL's penchant for putting the Cowboys into very difficult games early in the season, you probably need to have a solid plan at the beginning of the year.
And then need number 3, you going running back, you going defensive end, linebacker. What do you think?
I think, linebacker and running back to me are both right there because I mean, and that's why I said with the assumption that we're going to be able to get starting quality players for all these players, because if you're just looking at, how big a crater there is on the roster, there's no bigger crater in this roster than the running back depth chart and the linebacker depth chart, right?
You don't believe in Hunter Lipke?
Listen, Hunter Lipke is outside. He's more than a running back, so we don't just count him in the measly. I think so. It's a numbers issue, right? And obviously, I think you can get multiple quality players at this position in free agency or the draft. That's why it's just not as high a concern, is because it's going to be easier to obtain these. But as far as numbers and the fact that you're having to get starters at maybe multiple starters in each of those spots, that's why it's number 3 behind those very high end needs the Cowboys have.
Yeah, I would love for the Cowboys to find another impact pass rusher, because in this Matt Eberflus defense, I don't think we're going to see as much blitzing or as many simulated pressures as we saw under Mike Zimmer. So it's going to be more on the players just beating their man, right? And I just don't know who that other player is right now. I think you're hoping it's Marshawn Nealon. I think you're hoping that Sam Williams comes back and is healthy and is ready to go. I think you're hoping that they re-sign Golston. But even if all those guys come back, I don't know if they're the type of players that are really going to scare opposing offensive coordinators. Yeah. I would love for the Cowboys to have the situation where it was Micah and Lawrence when they were both healthy and they could both crush single blocks. I wouldn't mind seeing them pay up at that position. We'll see if they do that. But I also think that's where they're going to go in round 1. If I had to pick right now, I think defensive end is their most likely spot.
Yeah, I think, it would make some sense. Like if it came down to this, right? Like first round pick, high money free agents. One of them is a defensive end. One of them is a wide receiver. You choose which is which, right? Like if you could find your free agent wide receiver, that's your secondary pass catcher. Then you've solved it. Then you could go in there and at 12, you can go pick Shamar Stewart or Michael Williams or whoever you feel comfortable taking at 12 at defensive line. If you go out and you get, let's say you re-sign DeMarcus Lawrence and Chauncey Golston somehow, then you go out, then you draft in the first round Ted McMillan, Luther Burden, Matthew Golden. Like that's when you kind of trade those two spots. You see what's available. You see where the best value is for those two spots, because those are probably going to be your two biggest big ticket money items, right? And then you just figure out which is the best way to solve which.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Make sure you go check out the show on YouTube, download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.